Welcome to the Judicial Branch Part 3. Again, to recap, the U.S. District Courts are trial courts. They have jurisdiction to hear nearly all categories of federal cases. There are 94 federal district courts, or federal districts, Sometimes there are more than one federal district court within a district. For example, in Georgia, we have 3 districts. We have the Northern District, the Middle District, and the Southern District. Augusta has a district court within the Southern District. Sitting above the district courts are 12 regional courts. These are circuit courts, courts of appeals. If you are unhappy with the decision you got in the district court, you may appeal to the circuit court over your district court. As I mentioned, there are 12 Circuit Court of Appeals. These courts are solely appellate courts. They do not try cases, and they do not hear new evidence or witnesses. Next, we look at how state court judges are selected. In Georgia, they're selected by election. We vote for our judges. In some states, the governor appoints judges. Of course, there's pluses and minuses for elections versus appointment. Needless to say, when there are elections, there are also political influences. Now we turn to the U.S. Supreme Court. Look at some of its structure as well as some of its traditions. The Supreme Court is made up of 9 justices. There is the Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justices. As we know, these judges are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. They serve for life. However, they can be impeached by the House and convicted by the Senate. The Supreme Court, at its discretion, hears a limited number of cases each year. These are cases that usually begin in the federal or state court level and involve important questions about the Constitution or federal law. What does the President look at when appointing Supreme Court justices? There are numerous things. For example, he looks at the merit of that particular candidate that he wants to nominate, the political ideology, whether they're a constructionist judge or interpretive judge. It may be for a reward for supporting him or her, the president that is, in their presidential campaign. To make it to the Supreme Court, a disappointed party has to file a writ of certiorari. Out of all of the writs received by the Supreme Court, only 2% or less will actually have their cases heard. A writ of certiorari is what? B. A petition by the losing side in a lower court for the Supreme Court to hear an appeal. The next slide highlights the journey to the Supreme Court. Out of the thousands of petitions for certiorari that are filed, the Supreme Court usually only grants 100 or more. The next slide shows the current U.S. Supreme Court justices, led by Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr. The next slide looks at some of the factors that the Supreme Court utilizes in deciding cases. Who writes the opinion in a Supreme Court case? Well, if the Chief Justice is in the majority, he will assign the opinion to someone in the majority, or he will write it, or she will write it, his or herself. If the Chief Justice is in the minority, the senior-most justice that's in the majority will assign the opinion. The next slide shows how the Supreme Court has grown more conservative under Chief Justice Roberts' tenure. Supreme Court procedures. The term of the Supreme Court begins by statute on the first Monday in October. The term is divided between sittings, when the justices hear cases and deliver opinions, and intervening recesses, when they consider the business before the court and write opinions. The Supreme Court allows 30 minutes for each side when they hear a case. Public sessions, when the court's in session, begin promptly at 10 a.m. and continue until 3 p.m. with a 1-hour lunch break. During the recesses, Supreme Court justices study the argued cases as well as look at the forthcoming cases. They also work on their opinions that they've been assigned to write.